Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Vigmestad with YogaUOnline, and I'm here today with Lynn Crimando. Lynn serves as the teaching mentor for YogaUOnline's Wellness Educator program, and she is the lead teacher in our new 300-hour online yoga teacher training. Lynn is a yoga teacher, a board-certified health and wellness coach, CIAYT yoga therapist, certified personal trainer, and corrective exercise specialist. She has a private practice in New York City and teaches classes throughout the city on behalf of health advocates for older people. As a yoga teacher and yoga therapist, Lynn has extensive experience working with the condition of arthritis. She has found yoga to be a wonderful tool for managing the condition, including restoring function where there has been a loss. But she also warns that, as with any other physical practice, you can also contribute to the condition, especially when it comes to osteoarthritis. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So you've had a lot of experience working in the field of arthritis and using yoga as a vehicle to both manage and in some cases help the condition. And I've also heard you talk about how this is a personal experience for you. Can you talk about why you chose arthritis and how you became so involved in working with people who have arthritis?
Yes, thank you, Kate. It's interesting. I, like many people, came to yoga teaching after I had something happen to me. So it's been like 20 years now that I had a really pretty bad fall off of a bicycle that took about 8 years total of rehab. But after about 2 years, I just needed to define myself as something other than an accident survivor. So the first 2 years of rehab, there was not a lot of movement. And as most people who have big accidents find, that arthritis, osteoarthritis especially, ends up your constant companion after a while, after you've had an accident. So I was in my teacher training, and I was realizing in my teacher training that I wasn't getting the kind of training I needed to work with my own body, and that I needed to understand what was going on, and that I needed to be the teacher that I needed. Someone who could work with bodies that were broken and bodies that were, and this is, before I knew anything about yoga therapy. So I went to the Arthritis Foundation in New York and got trained in how to work in exercise. And I thought, well, I'll take what I've learned in the Arthritis Foundation and I'll take it to my own practice, and I'll take it to my own teaching. So I did that shortly after my first yoga training. And I kept doing yoga training, kept doing yoga therapy training. But what happened with the Arthritis Foundation was I was presenting more and more of their programs, and I ended up teaching for them, doing lectures, doing forums. I ended up training their teachers and helping them with presentations and presenting at hospitals. And so for the next 7 years or so, I was very affiliated with the Arthritis Foundation, and I was working with a lot of people, either in an 8-week program or at a lecture. Or I just came in contact with hundreds of people who had arthritis. So I've never, like from the very beginning, never not been kind of studying how to work with bodies that have arthritis. I do find yoga is a wonderful tool in working with arthritis. But one of the things I also found in my own body, and this is what brought me to this little realization that it wasn't all one-sided, was that there were things that I was doing in my yoga practice and even in my yoga teacher training that were seriously hurting my body. And I thought I was going to have to stop doing yoga. But what I figured out was I had to stop doing yoga the way I was doing yoga.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there something about yoga that, because you said it is beneficial to some people?
It's extremely beneficial to most people. If you already have arthritis, Yoga can help with range of motion. It can help generate circulation. It can help recirculate the fluid level in your joint capsules. It can also help with some of the more, people who have serious arthritis, some of the more troublesome symptoms might be that they're in a cycle of pain and depression, and they're not healing because they're not sleeping well. And for all of those reasons, yoga offers just a wealth of tools that are great for managing arthritis. Down to, there was a time in my practice when literally all I could do, I couldn't move. All I could do is pranayama and meditation. And that's, to me, that I marked that time after that accident is when I really learned yoga.
Yeah.
Because up until then, I was one of those people who thought yoga was asana practice.
Yeah.
And now I learned I just need all these other tools so much more. There was like never a time in my recovery process where I said to myself, you know what I need right now? I need to get up and do a warrior two. So, for pain management, for accepting, like my body was different. I needed to accept that my body was different and that I would never do certain things again. So yoga is amazing for that purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
It is really interesting when you think about arthritis or these different physical conditions. Oftentimes we focus so much on just the physical side of like what's the pain that you're feeling, what are those like physical symptoms, but they almost always come along with all of these kind of psycho-emotional like layers to them that
exactly.
Yeah. And then you mentioned something about how yoga can also be harmful.
Yes. Well,
can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. There are, I think there's aspects of it. There are phases. Once you have arthritis, it's a condition that you can't cure. There's no cure for arthritis. You can send it if you have a rheumatic form. We should also say, there's two kinds. There's a systemic, that's an autoimmune condition where your body attacks itself accidentally, thinks that your healthy cells are hurting you and it attacks them. And then there's a structural form. The structural form is called osteoarthritis, and that's what people call bone on bone. They call it the wear and tear arthritis. So wear and tear arthritis happens when you wear away articular surfaces of joints. And what happens when you wear away articular surfaces of joints is the bone senses that there's a space where there isn't supposed to be a space, and actually will start to grow bone, or bone will be degraded, or inflammation will set up housekeeping in a joint. So for yogis, working with bad body mechanics over years is drilling bad body mechanics into joint spaces that are not very forgiving and can actually wear away. I think what yoga practitioners don't realize is doing 108 sun salutations with bad body mechanics can be a form of repetitive stress injury. It can be something where you're actually damaging joint spaces because of the way you're working. And that was certainly the case with me. I couldn't do lateral work. I have severe arthritis in my lumbar spine. If you saw my MRI, you'd say, how's this person walking around? And partly why I'm walking around is yoga, but learning how to modify it and learning how to work with good body mechanics. So what I said before was I already have arthritis. The thing that I think yogis need to pay attention to is I don't want to get arthritis. And osteoarthritis, the one that is the wear and tear one, typically what doctors will tell you is, oh, you get that when you're in your middle 40s. Well, it doesn't take in the middle 40s, it doesn't take 20 minutes to wear away articular surfaces. It takes like 20 years. It takes like years of dysfunctional patterns. Right. So yogis who are practicing now, who don't have arthritis, need to understand that body mechanics are so important to the way we do asana practice. Because if you practice for years, I had an Ashtanga practice every single day of my life before this accident. And I don't know now whether some of the arthritis in my back was all from the accident, or would that have happened anyway because I was working with bad body mechanics? I will never know that. But what I do know now is I love Ashtanga yoga. I can't do it anymore. But if I was still doing it, I would sure make sure that I knew the mechanics of joint function in my body so that I wasn't wearing down the surfaces in my body.
Mm. So do you think that there's a type of yoga that like, or if there are there certain poses that you think people should not practice, or is it really just a matter of how we're doing the poses?
What I have figured out, and you know, this kind of set me down a rabbit hole when I started studying arthritis, and I started studying my own body, and I started studying how can I help my clients and my students. It's a rabbit hole, and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. I would say it this way: there is what I came down to is always thinking, what is the seed of the pose? I talk about this all the time with my students, the bija. What is the point of this pose? So it's not so much I can't do poses, it's that there's nothing important about any pose. What is important is, what is my energetic experience? Why am I doing this? You know, when I work with my clients, they want to be able to, I work with a lot of people who have arthritis and a lot of people who are older. They want to be able to pick up their grandchildren. They want to be able to parallel park and turn their head around like that. They want to be able to open the car door, pull groceries out. They want to be in their lives, right? And when you have arthritis and the joint spaces are compromised, that's a problem. So understanding, why am I doing this practice? What am I trying to either retain or develop or cultivate in my life? You can do any pose, the spirit of any pose, if you understand, why am I choosing this pose? So a lot of the standing poses, especially with wide legs where the hips might be askew, watching how you're doing that and watching what, you know, what a lot of yogis will do, and I don't want to just say yogis, because athletes in general will do, is they'll drive right by pain. They'll just bypass pain. They'll just say, well, I have to, you know, I always say this phrase, no pain, no gain, has a typo in it. And the real phrase should be no pain, no pain. It should be no pain. Movement should be pain-free. Practice should be pain-free. Yeah. If you're doing a yoga practice and you're doing chaturanga, rolling up through, and it hurts, you're hurting yourself, you know? Yeah. So I think there's not a question of there's poses you should avoid. I think what you should go toward is what would nourish and support my body and take care of my joints. Like, what is the practice that would fit my body, what my body is today?
Right. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I grew up as a dancer, and I think it's taken me as long to kind of untrain some of those habits of just ignoring that something's hurting, because it was so much about the like look or kind of aesthetic of a position. And I think we do the same thing in yoga, where we want to do this like crazy pose and ignore the internal experience, which is really what the point of yoga is anyways.
And you bring up a really good point, because if you look at some of these older prima ballerinas and ask yourself how many of them have had double hip replacements,
Most of them.
Huge quantity. And if you also go to the yogis who were doing lotus pose up the wazoo in the 80s, and you ask yourself how many of them have had a left hip replacement, tons of them.
Yeah.
Because joints aren't always made to take load, to be in a rotation, put all your body weight on it with load. You know, some people can do it and it's fine. But so I think that's really the point. The point is, what would be the healthiest way to take care of my body in my practice, and to really enjoy your practice and not like grind into, you know, to do poses for the sake of doing poses.
Right. Yeah. Are there any like telltale signs of like, oh, you might be having some of these bad body mechanics in your everyday life, and those are better?
You know what we do? We tend to do intermittent pain in a joint when you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s is a sign that something isn't right. If you feel sensation inside a joint capsule and it doesn't feel quite right, that's your joint capsule saying, could you please stop doing this right now?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're on the road to arthritis because they say, oh, my knee is bugging me. You know, today my knee's bugging me. And they don't notice that they're saying my knee's bugging me 10 times a month.
Right.
You know, that as time is going on, people tend to live with aches and pains and they think it's because I did that thing, or, you know, they don't recognize that this is happening a lot. So things that you want to be watching out for are, does something consistently hurt? So here's a good sign. When I have a client and they have pain, and they say, sometimes the pain's over here and sometimes the pain's over here. And sometimes when you have pain in an articular structure, you're going to point to the same spot almost every time. You're going to say, this is in the bone on bone one. It hurts right here. Well, we could say what that is. You know, that's where this bone hits that bone, and the articular surface. Every time I do a certain movement that hurts, that's a sign. It may not be arthritis, but it's not something you should ignore.
Right.
And I think as sometimes, this is how I grew up. I would just say how I grew up is you kind of push through the pain, right? It hurts to do the splits. Well, some people aren't supposed to do the splits. Some people don't have a femur head that is the shape that would allow them to do the splits, but they push through. The other mistake I think yogis make a lot is to think everything is muscular. And I'll give you a great example, a squat pose. In a squat pose, we think, oh, my adductors are so tight, I just have to loosen them up. And then you get into all these positions and you open your legs and you do. You don't consider that maybe you just have a short femur head bone. You know, the neck of your femur head might be short or might be angled or might be just in a position. You might have some dysplasia that you didn't know about.
Right.
So I think assuming that your inability to do a pose that you want to do is because your muscles is 100% because of muscles, and also because you're just doing it wrong. And not ever assuming or not ever considering, well, maybe my anatomy isn't structured for this pose.
So with everything that we know today about yoga and arthritis, for both experienced yogis and those who might be new coming to a class, what would you offer as the top 3 or so pieces of advice to help protect your joints if you're going into a yoga practice?
Well, first of all, the attitude that you come into yoga practice should be that you are the master and the subject matter expert of your own body, so that everyone should feel entitled to pass or to modify anything that doesn't feel right on their body. But I would say that starts with, if I was going to hit 3 things, don't look on any other person's mat. Just work with the body that's on your mat. Because you'll be sitting over here. Well, we're doing, you know, a lot of online stuff now, which in some ways solves the problem of people looking around the room and going, oh, that person's doing this, I should be able to do that. And I can remember when I started doing yoga and I'd be looking at someone and going, oh my, I should be able to open my leg that far. And I would force. So it's really stay with the body that's on your own mat. And no matter what you see a teacher doing or what other people in a practice that you're sharing are doing, you should work with the body on your mat and understand that body and how that body works so that you are able to make the practice work for your body, not vice versa. Definitely listen to pain. there's pain that you get that says, oh, I haven't used this muscle in a while and my muscle is cranky and it's telling me to stop doing this. And there's pain that sounds like something's burning, something's about to rip, my joint feels like something's out of place. You know, my body, if your joint is telling you something's wrong, something's wrong. So anything you experience in a joint capsule, you've got to listen to that. And if you have intermittent pain that's quite regular in the same spot, let's say you've got a right knee that on a regular basis, your right kneecap hurts. There's a ton of people there that, you know, the knee has two joints, the big joint that people know about, but the knee joint, the kneecap is a patellofemoral joint. That's a joint. And there's when I had knee surgery 12 years after my accident, they said, you had a ton of arthritis under your kneecap. I never felt that, but that was going to continue to degrade. They scraped it all out. And the third thing I would say is this. I'm going to use a bad word. Use the damn props. You know? It's not a sign of pride to not use props. It's not a sign that you're toughing it out and you don't need, use the props, because the props make it easier to pivot on your hips and to move your spine around. And people, I have students who just won't use props. And I would say to those people, that's not useful. It's not a useful practice to put your body into positions when you could bridge a gap or you could fix an angle with a blanket or a block or the wall. So use the props. That would be my three things.
Yeah.
Stay on your own mat, listen to pain. And if I could just say it very crudely, use the damn props. You know?
Those are all very good pieces of advice. So you have a course with us coming up on the topic of arthritis. Can you shed a little light into what is going to be in those courses?
Yeah, this came out of a realization that I had, that yogis don't realize that the causes of arthritis, particularly osteoarthritis, you know, systemic arthritis, no one knows the cause. And it's a different condition and it has a different kind of mindset. This course is for both people, but I'm really focused on body mechanics. And the reason I'm focused on body mechanics is that I don't think yogis always realize that they're doing actual damage to their joints when they don't use the props, when they don't listen to pain. I don't think people are aware that they're doing actual damage when they work with bad body mechanics. So one of the things that I wanted to do in this course was to show people a little bit about body mechanics and bring a little bit of my corrective exercise and fitness training into the yoga space to help yogis understand what they should know about joint function so that they can modify their practices. And it fits beautifully with yoga to work with good body mechanics. It's just, if you just make it part of your practice, it's a wonderful thing. So we'll be doing that. And I did a practice, and the intention of the practice is for people to be able to go through this practice. And I'm just realizing you did the practice with me.
I know,
so you can talk about the practice.
Really nice practice.
Is to be able to feel their body moving through space and feel their joints interacting with each other. It's a different kind of practice. It's really an experiential practice to explore your own body mechanics. So that was a big part of it, was to just create something where people could, I call them samskaras. They're postural samskaras. They could see where they're going. And the time to deal with your arthritis is 20 years before you get it. And that's to always work with the better body mechanics and build yourself up from there.
Yeah.
So
Great.
that's what we're doing in the class.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. It sounds very practical and something that people can take into their practice in their own lives.
And I do give guidelines for teachers. I mean, it's for anybody, but if you just know the key joints, the sort of the key structural workhorse joints and how to look at them on a grid, you can look at your own body, but you can also, if you're a yoga teacher, look at your students' bodies and understand a lot just by a quick look about what's going on in their bodies.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. It was so nice to chat with you today.
You too.
And I'm looking forward to seeing your course.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.